From ABC News, this is the Weekend Report. Now from our Washington headquarters, here's Tom Jerriel.
Good evening. Barring any last-minute snags, Robert McFarlane will get the nod as National Security Advisor to President Reagan. The powerful post of briefing the President daily on foreign affairs was opened up when NSC Director William Clark was nominated to head the Interior Department. ABC's Barrie Dunsmore, who first broke the news of McFarlane's anticipated appointment, tonight has details.
Former Marine Colonel Robert McFarlane is the quintessential staff officer, quick, competent, and quiet. The latter quality is why Defense Secretary Weinberger and CIA Chief Casey had some doubts about him. They wanted to be sure that the hard-line conservative view, represented by outgoing National Security Advisor William Clark, would not be lost in the White House. They and Republican conservatives touted UN Ambassador Jean Kirkpatrick for the job. Her neoconservative credentials are impeccable, but her acerbic personality would have guaranteed enormous conflict. So it's understood she will be offered a consolation prize, so far undefined.
In the event President Reagan asked you to serve in another capacity, would you do so?
Obviously, that would depend on what capacity.
For his part, McFarlane continues to wait out the formal announcement of his appointment while making it clear he is prepared to take the job.
Well, I never think it's useful to speculate on things like that. I've worked in government for 24 years.
The selection of Robert McFarlane as National Security Advisor is seen by most foreign policy observers as a plus. He knows arms control and the Soviets, and he's just had a major taste of the Mideast. But there's also a consensus among the experts that American foreign policy in the next year will be reactive, and the National Security Advisor will mainly be putting his finger in the various holes of the dike. Barrie Dunsmore, ABC News, the State Department.
The deadlock between the major powers of East and Western Europe over the planned deployment of new nuclear weapons by NATO continued today despite lengthy talks in Vienna. Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko and West German Foreign Minister Genscher talked for over 11 hours about their opposing views on the weapons deployment. Afterward, Genscher said neither side had budged. But despite the continued impasse, Gromyko didn't indicate the Soviets would break off the Geneva arms talks, where they're still trying to reach some compromise before those missiles are deployed in December. 1,000 days in office will be marked by President Reagan tomorrow. It's a day on which he'll legally become a candidate for re-election and an occasion for critics of the administration to step up their attacks. More from Mike von Fremd.
The president arrived back at the White House after a weekend of rest at Camp David, ready to put his signature on documents that technically make him a presidential candidate. Mr. Reagan has not yet personally said he's going to run again, and his chief of staff, James Baker, is not absolutely sure he will.
No, not 100% sure, because he has not as yet stepped out there and asked the American people for 4 more years. And I think that in his own mind, he will not consider himself formally a candidate until he does that.
But campaign manager Edward Rollins on This Week with David Brinkley says that he has no doubt.
I'm 100% convinced the president is going to run.
The Democrats have already begun their campaign against Ronald Reagan with this report released by the Americans for Democratic Action, noting the president's 1,000th day in office and his record. It attacks Mr. Reagan on civil rights, arms control, and particularly the economy and high unemployment, which is an issue Senate Democrats are making the most of.
Under this administration, we are talking about getting unemployment down to 9%. Any other administration, Republican or Democrat, since 1945 would have defined 9% to be a disaster.
To counter all this criticism from the Democrats, the Reagan-Bush Committee plans to spend over $21 million in the primaries. Campaign manager Edward Rollins says the committee will have to do everything it can to overcome the fact that only 1 out of 4 voters identifies with the Republican Party. Mike von Fremd, ABC News, the White House.
At the Kennedy Center here in Washington tonight, there was a premiere of the new film, The Right Stuff. That movie chronicles America's entry into the space age, and although it was in the works long before former astronaut John Glenn decided to run for president, its release now is seen as a potential boost to the Glenn campaign. Glenn didn't attend tonight's festivities, but a number of America's early space heroes did, and Lynn Sherr was also there.
This was Washington's chance to see what all the fuss is about, complete with a fleet of antique airplanes drumming up publicity. led by the legendary test pilot Chuck Yeager, the man who broke the sound barrier. 4 of the 7 original Mercury astronauts were there, and the actors who portray them. That's Ed Harris, who plays John Glenn, which is the closest America's first man in orbit got to the festivities. He let the big screen tell his story today. The Glen campaign continues to insist the movie will not affect their candidate.
The movie certainly is about a very important part and time in America's history, a time in which Senator Glenn played a very important part. But the people, I don't believe, are going to be rushing out of movie theaters after seeing the movie saying, I'm going to vote for John Glenn.
Maybe not, but they've taken advantage of the timing to release their own TV commercial this weekend. And although it devotes only 19 seconds of its 4.5 minutes to Glenn's spaceflight, it closes on a slogan that should remind at least some voters of the movie.
John Glenn for president. Believe in the future again.
Here at the party following the film, it was more a celebration of a potential Hollywood hit than a campaign. But then again, this is Washington. And in Washington, you're never too far from the political impact of the right stuff.
Politics is perception. It's not reality. And what people perceive is usually the way they vote.
Lynn Sherr, ABC News, Washington.